My friends and I just really wanted a place where we could feel comfortable, safe, and watch women's sports, period. I knew that we had to have content. If we don't have content, we don't have a sports bar. That's what a sports bar is. Not only do we have, women playing sports on TV, like on the channel, how else can we support women? Because the motto isn't we support women on TV. The motto isn't even we support women in sports. It's just we support women, period.
Hello and welcome to About Time, the show where we have long overdue conversations about the journey of women in sports. My name is Marky Freeman, athlete, author, and sports fan, but an even bigger fan of the women who are changing them. In today's episode, we'll dive into the topic of building community around women's sports. We'll hear how one woman's dedication has forged a close-knit sports community, reshaping the way we engage with women's athletics. This interview is brought to you by WeCoach. Prior to Title IX, over 90% of women collegiate sports teams were coached by women. Today, over 50 years later, that number has decreased to 41%. That's why WeCoach launched Move the Numbers to help change the landscape for women coaches and the student athletes they lead. WeCoach is a one-of-a-kind nonprofit membership organization dedicated to recruiting, advancing, and retaining women coaches in all sports and levels through year-round professional growth and leadership development programs. WeCoach fosters a diverse and inclusive community of over 10,000 coaching leaders who inspire young women to follow in their footsteps. If she can see her, she can be her. Together, we move the numbers to support and increase women in coaching. We teach, we inspire, we motivate, we lead, we coach. Visit our website at wecoachsports.org. That's wecoachsports.org. I'm so excited to be joined by our next guest. Meet Jenny Nguyen, the powerhouse owner of the Sports Bra. With a background as an acclaimed executive chef, a former college basketball player, and a lifelong women's sports enthusiast, she brings a unique blend of passion and expertise to her mission of making great food, delicious drinks, and providing a space that supports, empowers, and promotes girls and women in sports. Please welcome Jenny Nguyen.
Hi, my name is Jenny Nguyen. I'm the owner and founder of the Sports Bra, and it's about time we had a place where people can watch women's sports.
Jenny, I'm so excited to speak with you. Just learning as much as I could up until this point about your journey, about your story, about what you stand for and what you represent. It's been absolutely beautiful. And I think I would consider it an honor to have this conversation with you as the first and the only of so many things. So thank you for taking the time to join us on About Time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
An acclaimed executive chef, you're a former college basketball player, and you also refer to yourself as a lifelong sports fan. Now, Jenny, these are two totally different worlds, two totally different industries when we talk about culinary arts and sports. How did you combine these two industries to give birth to the Sports Bra?
That's a great question. I don't think I had ever anticipated the two to combine at all. But ultimately, it's really the two places that I have ever felt comfortable in or excelled at. I started playing basketball at a very young age, and it was really a part of my identity. I grew up playing basketball and I was pretty good at it. So it got to the point where people would know me as the basketball player. It was like, Jenny, the basketball player. That was like the first descriptor. And it was all the way like that until about 2 weeks before my first college basketball game. And it's weird because I don't feel comfortable saying a college athlete because I was just about to play my first college basketball game at a community college. So super small over here in Vancouver, Washington. And I went to an open gym just for fun, and I blew out my ACL and 2 weeks before our first game. So I never played an actual game in college. And so I was 19 years old, blew out my ACL, and it was devastating. It was a really, really devastating injury for me. And at the time, I felt invincible. I felt like I had like my whole college career ahead of me and like everything. And it wasn't probably a year after that I started to get into cooking. And it was mostly because I moved away to college. And I was homesick, but I wasn't homesick for home. I was homesick for like the food that I grew up eating. My mom cooked Vietnamese food like pretty much every day. And so I went off to
Mm.
college, and the food was like cafeteria food, you know, it was just like a bunch of food that I wasn't familiar with. I mean, you know, lasagna, burgers, that kind of stuff. And it was like awesome at first because I'd never gotten to eat a lot of that food growing up. But then I was just like, oh my gosh, I really miss mom's food. And so I emailed her and I was like, Mom, can I have some of those recipes? And she goes, who are you? Because like I literally never touched, I never was had any interest in cooking or anything growing up.
Uh,
Because I was just like all of my free time was spent playing basketball. And so that was when I started to cook was in the dorms because I just missed home. And then about a year after that, I told my parents that I wanted to go into the culinary arts, and they weren't very thrilled about that at all. But it was something that I was very passionate about after basketball. So I really had like these two halves of my life where, and like it wasn't until later that I realized that these are like very male dominated industries. You know, sports, basketball, and then like especially professional kitchens are very much like toxic masculinity and all of those things. And so, but there were both, you know, kind of arenas that I thrived in. And so I just went from one to the other. And it wasn't until, you know, basically I really started to conceptualize the sports bra that I was like, wow, you know, my lived experience would really, I feel like everything has led up to this. And so those two things combined. And it was really not in the game, in the cards for me, until I really started to put the sports bra as this like fantasy land together as a potential reality.
and I'll say this: you are a college athlete. You're part of the 2.9% that got to join a college roster. But we have to talk about that sequence from becoming an athlete or being an athlete, a college athlete, to becoming a chef. You said it's a space that's dominated by males. What did it look like as far as identity? Because that could have been an issue for you as an athlete, as Jenny, the basketball player, going to Jenny, the chef, and Jenny, the woman in this male dominant space, and dealing with that toxic masculinity that you hinted to just a moment ago. What shifted for you to feel like you belonged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of the biggest struggles were with my family. So
Mm,
I am first generation Vietnamese American. My parents
okay.
came here from Vietnam during the war in 1975, and I'm an only child. And so if you know any Asians, you know how Asian parents can be with their kids. You know, they have a
Hmm.
lot of expectations, especially you know, immigrant families. So my parents wanted me to be one of three things: an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. Those were my options. Um, and so when I grew up playing basketball, and another thing is in a lot of Asian cultures, women don't play sports. Like that's not what they do. They're cooking, they're at home, they're raising a family, like very pretty traditional, you know? And so when I grew up kind of like a quote unquote tomboy, you know, my mom was, I don't want to say devastated, but my mom is very much like a girly girl, always trying to get me in dresses, always like wanting to introduce me to makeup at a really young age, like all of these really like girly things. And I was the only child. And so, you know, I felt like a kind of a constant disappointment to her growing up. And I never grew out of it. You know, I think that she just
Mm.
thought that I was like playing as a kid, that I would grow out of it. And I just never did. And then so when I had my injury, it was an opportunity for me to reevaluate who I was, because up until then, I literally didn't think about, you know, a career outside of basketball, which I was never good enough to play like career basketball. But in my mind, I just didn't think about, you know, like what I would do to make money later on.
Hmm.
You know, you're just a kid, really. So when I had my injury, my mom was basically like, okay, this is your opportunity to figure out what you want to be. Your father and I want you to be a doctor. And
Hmm.
so I didn't have any ambitions to be anything. I was really depressed, honestly, at the time. So I enrolled into college pre-med because I was just like, well, I'm pretty good at school. Like I don't care. Like my parents want me to do this. I don't have any ideas. So I actually enrolled pre-med. And then when I started cooking in the dorms, I was doing both. And so I had healed from my injury. So I was playing intramural ball. I was playing like league ball, having a ball, like literally having a great time at college. But the studies were really, really hard. And I had also just come out when I was 17. And so I was navigating, like my queer identity,
Mm-hmm.
college, being away from home, being an only child, being away from my parents. Like I was navigating all of these things at once. And so there was, there's a lot going on. But when I stepped foot in the kitchen, everything disappeared. And I would lose hours and hours and hours in the kitchen, like prepping, making pasta from scratch, doing whatever, like braising lamb for 6 hours. And it just, time went by like this.
Mm.
And I was dating a woman at the time, and she goes, Jenny, I literally only ever see you be yourself in two places, on the basketball court and in the kitchen. And when she said that, I was just like, like, oh, that's interesting. Because, I was struggling with like OChem and bio and like all of this crazy classwork. And I was like a little bit struggling with dating a woman for the first time. And then like having like this push pull with my parents. But like all of that stuff disappeared as soon as I stepped in the kitchen or as soon as I stepped on the basketball court. And like to have somebody there who knew me and who recognized that and to bring it to my attention. Because for me, I was just like going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that growing up playing sports, and there are studies that can back this up. I've developed like a sense of self, a sense of self-worth, um, a type of confidence that I feel like can only be given in a certain number of ways. And sports is one of them for me. So the ability to kind of like hold my own, know what value I bring to a team or what value I have as an individual, all of those things kind of built up this certain level of confidence for me. And I carried that on the court. And when I was in the kitchen, it was very much something that I was able to harness. When I decided, there was definitely a moment when I decided, okay, I don't want to be a doctor. This is what I want to be. I want to be a chef. And as soon as I, started to go down that path, I found strengths in the same kind of ways that I do as an athlete, I guess is how to say it. Like the ability to like stand up for yourself, the ability to know your worth, your talent, your skill set, and to bring that to the forefront. And, you know, as cliche as it sounds, the kitchen is not a place to show your weakness. Like it's like blood in the water, right? So you get in there, you're with a bunch of dudes, hot kitchen, knives, lots of ego. And if you show a weakness in there, they're going to rip you apart. So you walk in there,
Mm.
you puff your chest out, you talk a big game, kind of like you talk trash on the court, right? It's all kind of the same. And so I carried a lot of those same skills, people skills, whatever you want to call them, with me into the kitchen. And that really took me a long way. Yeah, I ended up finishing college and then enrolling in culinary school. And while I was going to culinary school, I worked full time in real kitchens. And so I was able to get both like kind of this bookworky, like geeky, classic chef training, as well as like real life, like hardcore training in some pretty intense Portland kitchens. And so having both of those things at the same time really it sped up my learning curve. So I started out as like prep and then I worked my way up to an executive chef over the course of about 15 years. So,
Long, extensive career, absolutely
yeah.
amazing. And I love hearing how basketball, how you took those experiences and all that you learned from the game of basketball and how you applied it to life and also your career in the kitchen as well. You're the first of so many things. The sports bra is the first of its kind ever, and it's been an inspiration to so many others. You're the only child, and sometimes being the first is just as hard, if not harder, than being the only. As a minority, a woman, right? Vietnamese woman, first generation, a queer woman. There's so many challenges that come with that, but you've accomplished a lot. And let's be clear. The sports bra has been very successful. You guys brought in nearly $1 million in the first 8 months, but it's also a culture that is very, very based around empowering young girls and women in sports. How has your struggles and your experiences and your life and your career around the game of basketball contributed to the environment that you try to create at the sports bra?
Oh my gosh, so much so. Like that's such a great question. A lot of folks come to me and they see the sports bra as this whole vision all at once. And for me, it was built over time in a very like natural way based on my lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like these small, what feel like small intentional decisions that I made as we were doing the build out. My friends and I just really wanted a place where we could feel comfortable, safe, and watch women's sports, period. And like, I love the feeling of like a traditional kind of cozy, like Cheers kind of vibe, sports bar. Like, I would love to walk into a space like that and feel comfortable. Unfortunately, as I don't know if you've been to Portland, but in Portland, it's predominantly white. And so coming into spaces looking like I do doesn't always feel safe. And then sports bars, that environment is traditionally worse than, like it's just where toxic masculinity kind of lives and breathes. So my friends and I, we all played basketball together. A majority of us are like non-binary queer folks. And so when we would get together, we'd go out to a place. It was like a whole thing. And ultimately what we dreamed up was this place, fantasy place where we could go and watch sports. And that's how the sports bras like beginning seed was planted. And it wasn't until like I got a physical space and I was like, okay, I have the opportunity to do whatever I want with this space. How do we want this to be? Like I can create my own perfect. And what's funny is that because I have the lived experience of all of these different kind of intersectionality, I created a space that was meant for me, but I ultimately created a space that feels home to a lot of different types of people, which is really a beautiful thing that I wasn't, that wasn't part of the plan. But so many people walk in and you can see their shoulders like release. You can hear them sigh. And a lot of people actually come in and they cry and they don't know why they're crying, except that they're like, I'm here, like I've made it here, so I think a lot of it is intentionality. A lot of it is based on my lived experience. And the one story that a lot of folks don't know about, I don't think, is that it was a really difficult decision for me to decide to go for it or not. It's super scary. I basically, came to that fork in the road where on one path, it's the complete unknown. Like I'd never had a business. I mean, I'd run a kitchen, but running a kitchen and running a business are two completely different things. It was going to take all of my resources. So, I had planned like, okay, what happens if I fail? And so there was this path where I didn't know what was going to happen, but if I failed, I kind of had like, mom and dad live nearby. They have a basement. I could move into the basement. I have all these skills as a chef. Like there was a way for me to get out. I don't have a family. I'm not married. So there was, I also was very fortunate to have, a very great support network where I knew I had a fallback plan. So if I put all of my resources into this, I knew that, I could move in with my parents and start from scratch and start working again. So I had this path of, I had no idea. And then I had this path that I was already on, which also a lot of people don't know this, but I stopped working for about 5 years before I opened the sports bra. And I was, making ends meet and I was kind of in this like semi-retired mode. So I hadn't worked in 5 years and I hadn't needed to. So I was kind of like coasting. And so I had the opportunity to either just stay on this really cozy track where there was no pressure, no timelines, no schedules, no deadlines, nothing. I didn't have a boss. I didn't have a job. And then I had this other thing, which I had worked for mom and pop restaurants and I had seen owners go off the deep end because of stress, because of drugs, alcohol, infidelity, like you name it. I mean, owners, the workload is just incredible. And so I was at this fork in the road and I literally had no idea, but I knew I had to choose because I was basically spending all of my time thinking and dreaming about the sports bra. And I was like, okay, I either have to let it go or I have to go all in. And I'm one of those people where I make it so it's black and white for me. I know that life isn't that way, but I have to do that for myself so I can just invest everything. So I was sitting around just beating my head against a wall trying to figure out what I was going to do. And there was this night where my girlfriend and I, she's an ex now, but we were sitting around and we had met playing basketball 14 years ago. and we were sitting around talking about how I said, can you imagine if when we were little, if our parents took us to a place like the sports bra, how much of an impact that would have had on our lives moving forward? Like, and I just thought about like a 7-year-old me where I was like just really starting to get into basketball, talking about like YMCA stuff. And then I thought about me as like an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old, 15, 17, 19, 21, 25, 30. Turns out I'd never been in a place where I felt like it was made for me. I'd never
Mm.
felt like there was a place where all of my passions and all of my loves and everything combined. And so when I thought about the little Jenny, I thought, you know, to walk into a place as a kid, an athlete, a girl athlete, and to feel represented and seen and celebrated.
Mm.
What would that have done for me as a kid? Not just as an athlete, but like, you know, the whole picture. And right then I decided that I was going to do it and that I wanted the bar to be all ages. Um, because ultimately, like, I thought if I put everything that I have into this, and someday there's one kid that comes in there and they see a future for themselves on the up on the TV, all the hard work would be worth it. And
Mm.
that was the turning point. And as soon as I just thought about that, I was like, I'm doing this. I have to do this. I felt like a responsibility to do it. And that was the turning point, and that was also the thing that got me out of bed when things got really hard. Because I would say the first 3 months, 3 months leading up into doors opening, and then the 3 months after that, there were days where I didn't think I could do it. I thought I can't do like it's too hard. This is too much. It's too hard. I'm not the person for this. And just like on kind of all that talk and like, the creeping, what is it called? Imposter syndrome creeps in, like all of that shit right in the morning.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'd like put the pillow over my head and just wish it all went away and was like,
Mm.
I don't want any part of this. Like there were days where it got that bad. And then that little Jenny, the image of little Jenny sitting there, and that propelled me out of bed. Like it wasn't about me, it was about like somebody else. I think as women oftentimes we're way better at taking care of other people than we are at taking care of ourselves.
Ourselves, no doubt.
And so yeah, and so like the ability to kind of like displace this need to continue helped
Mhm.
me. And so that's what really propelled it, and that's what got me out of bed when I felt like I wanted to give up. And thank God those days are over. But yeah, the beginning was really, really, really tough. And mad props to anyone who has ever started their own business. Like it is something else, particularly a bar and restaurant. It is a whole situation that I can't believe so many people have done it. You know what I mean? Like it's it's insane. It's insane. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that and tapping into that younger Jenny. And I think that explains a lot of the emotion that you see when people walk into your establishment. The emotions, even in the form of tears, the dropping of the shoulders, feeling like they exist and there's been a place created just for them. Jenny, I can't
mhm,
tell you how many times I've gone to restaurants and bars and I have had to fight over the remote control with a guy on the other side who's already claimed dibs on the television, regardless of how big of a game I'm trying to watch, right?
mhm,
Woman's
yep,
game. I can't tell you how many times whether it's the manager, the bartender, whoever it was, just didn't give that game that we wanted to watch, my friends and my family, the energy or the attention that we felt it deserved, of even
mhm.
trying to surf the channels. So knowing that we can go into the sports bra and we're going to watch women's sports, it's absolutely phenomenal. But you said something a moment ago. You said it's so important for these young girls to see sports, to see women that look like them. Why is that so important, Jenny?
I mean, we've heard the same refrain over and over, and it just can't be overstated that
Mm-hmm.
representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't see it, how do you know you can be it?
Mhm.
And for so long, girls growing up playing sports have had to idolize folks like, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, or I'm a basketball player, so that's all the references I can think of. Like
I'm
Clyde
with you there.
Drexler. Yeah, I grew up with the Blazers, and like I was just like, oh man, if I could rebound like Buck Williams, like, or defense like Drum Kersey, and like it was just like it doesn't feel as tangible when you're making
Mhm.
that much of a leap. But if there's a woman that's doing that, it feels like much more real. Like, you know, like that could be you. That could be you if you can see it. And, like I think watching the Women's World Cup, and there is an interview with Marta, and she talks about how when she was playing soccer as a little girl, there was nobody on TV for her to look up to. And she knew her role in creating and becoming that person. But now, like, for her to hand the baton to these 18, 19-year-old superstars who are now being shown on TVs all over the globe, like that's what
Mhm.
this is about. Like that's what this is all about. And for the bra to be even just a cog in that machine to help promote representation, to get more access, easier for people to get eyes on things. And, it's not just big games like you're talking about. You want to go and see this huge game and you're fighting over the remote control. We're talking about like anybody at any time can come into the bra, and we're going to be showing whatever we can get our hands on, whether it's like high school girls basketball that happens to be on
Wow.
ESPN3, which happens
Wow.
sometimes, or
Uh-huh.
we play gymnastics all the time. We were able to show all of the world championships track and field out of Budapest. um so we were able to show all of that stuff, and most people they see highlight reels, or they're gonna watch Shakari take over the 100, the big stuff. But
Yeah.
we were able to show long jump, pole vault, like all of the things, and the ability to see all of those folks. It's not just for the kids in the audience or for the people who are happen to be dining at the restaurant to see what's possible, but it's also giving all of the athletes the representation that they've been missing, the mad props. I mean, female athletes have been freaking killing it forever. And just because we haven't been seeing it or hearing about it doesn't mean it hasn't been happening. And now, like, the media is all about it. And it's just like, oh, people are like, oh, wow, girls' college basketball is so awesome now. It's like, dude, it's been awesome
It's always.
forever. Granted, the skills have been like just,
Oh
incline,
yeah, no doubt.
um, but yeah, now it's just people are looking. How can you be a fan of something you can't see? That's another thing I say to people all the time. How can you be a fan of something you can't see? And if we can increase fandom, spectatorship, that stuff leads into advertising, money for players, money for coaches, money for better streaming service, money for better like production value. That's another thing is like when the WNBA first came out, the production value absolutely stank. And so when the ratings were poor, people would be like, oh, it's boring. That's why nobody watches it. I tell you what, if you put the production value of the WNBA in year one on the NBA right now, nobody would watch it either. It'd be garbage, right? So don't tell, like, yeah. So
Facts.
yeah.
Facts. I mean, when you take a look at it, only 5% of all sports television covers women's basketball or women's sports in general. Correction,
Mhm,
women
mhm.
sports in general. With such limited coverage, how are you guys able to really serve and stay committed to your customers?
The very first thing I did before I even started writing my business plan was I knew that we had to have content. If we don't have content, we don't have a sports bar. That's what a
Mm-hmm.
sports bar is. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
you just have a bar, right? So that was my number one concern before I did anything. And so I did a ton of research. And one little statistic I want to plug in there is that in the 1980s, they did a study about how much women's sports was out there, and it was 4%. So between 1980 and now, basically there's been no
43
change.
years.
Yep.
Wow.
Little to no change in how much women's sports is available via inline, is what we should say, which is cable
You're
satellite. There's a lot more options now through streaming, and that's kind of the avenue that I decided to take. Um, so prior to even putting pen to paper, I did a ton of research on streaming services. Turns out, and a lot of people don't know this because people skirt this law all the time. Turns out that about 98% of all streaming services out there are for personal use only. It's not for commercial or business use. So anytime you go to a bar or restaurant and they've got like Fubo or Sling or DAZN or any of those streaming services, they're actually breaking a broadcasting law. But there are like tens of thousands of places doing it, and they're just rolling the dice. But I knew for my bar, there's two things. One, we were going to be the first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that when you do something like that, there's a lot of eyes and you're kind of under a magnifying glass. Two is I also didn't want our guests or the general public to be fooled into thinking that there is more content out there than there actually is by skirting these laws. Like if we were open 24/7 and there was always games on, people wouldn't believe that there's a problem when there still is a serious problem. And so for us as a business, we wanted to use that like it's actually kind of a weakness of our business model. We wanted to use that as a highlight to maybe implement some change, maybe, be a squeaky wheel, maybe have our customers be a squeaky wheel. Like every once in a while, we'll turn off TVs at the bra. If there's no live games on, we'll turn them off, or it'll be on like a screensaver. And folks I tell people, absolutely, like if they're upset or whatever, I'm like, hey, it's because there's plenty of women playing sports right now at this moment. It's just not on TV. If you want, take a picture of this screen, tell people you're at the sports bra and there's nothing on. Like it's a squeaky wheel. Like people are going to listen. And so we wanted to use it. We wanted to use authenticity and reality as a way to have a conversation about the lack of content for women's sports. So it was kind of two-factor. But anyway, I reached out to a bunch of really big, what I felt like were big media brands to start a conversation. Because one loophole with streaming is that if you have written permission from a streaming service, you can do it. And so I reached out to, one of the first things I did was I reached out to Just Women's Sports, because they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content via YouTube, which is the same streaming rights issues as any other streaming service. YouTube, you can't play in a restaurant unless you have explicit written consent from either the makers of the content or the league that is playing. So I reached out to Just Women's Sports. They got back to me right away. And I reached out to ESPN. They got back to me right away. And to me, that those two combined, I felt comfortable enough with their hundreds and thousands of hours of content available, that I would be able to have enough to get started. And then just know that I would constantly having to be reaching out and asking different leagues, streaming services, all these things to like piecemeal together, kind of like a playlist, I guess, which was really, really a daunting task, especially with opening a restaurant at the same time. It felt like somebody else's full-time job, but it was really at the backbone, kind of a part of the backbone of our business. And so it was really important that we had things on TV, or that we had a good, story to tell when there wasn't something on TV.
That does not sound easy at all. But what is easy for some is not easy for others. And again, just celebrating you for what you've done and the amount of energy that you continue to put into making this the type of experience and just living through the mission that you have at the Sports Bra. Now, at your establishment, at the Sports Bra, you have had a number of recognizable names, a number of sports figures, a number of icons in my world. Here recently, Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird came through there. And Sue Bird said something that was truly phenomenal. And it was revelational for me. She said this, speaking about the Sports Bra, she said, women's sports is always ahead of society, and it's about time society catches up. And I think this is a huge compliment to the ripple in the ocean, the ripple in the sea that you've created through the connections and the collaboration that you've started through the Sports Bra. I mean, you've worked with a lot of big brands, right? We could talk about Buick. We can talk about sports networks like ESPN. And then you've also formed some awesome collaborations with women who have different restaurants and bars and distilleries in the area, in the Portland area. Why are you so intentional about collaborating? And why are you so intentional about the collaborations that you've made?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like, the birth of the idea of the sports bra and like me actually putting pen to paper happened during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And it was kind of the turmoil of the pandemic and also like my inner turmoil of having been semi-retired for a long time. And I just felt like I wanted to give back. And with the pandemic, so many people were suffering, and you could see that it wasn't equal. Like the pandemic,
Hmm.
yes, the virus hit everybody, but how it impacted people, I mean, the disparities, socioeconomic disparities, all of those things, I just felt like I wanted to give back. I wanted to do something. And when kind of the idea of the sports bra popped up and I started to really delve into it, I really wanted it to be about the community. And I
Hmm.
didn't know at the time that the sports bra was going to become kind of what it has now, which is like a globally recognized brand that is like
Hmm.
pushing the envelope for a lot of
As it
different
should
things. That
be.
that
As it should
that's
be.
thank you. That's not how I thought it was going to be. I thought if anything, I grew up in Portland. Portland is my hometown, born and raised Portland. So I knew that there was this base of devout women sports lovers. And
Hmm.
I wasn't sure that the sports bra would be able to survive any other place but Portland. But if it was going to survive, I knew Portland was the spot for it. And when I was joking back in 2018 about the sports bra, the motto for it came up within 48 hours. I was just like, I have the theme. It's going to be "We support women," and I just thought it was hilarious, because like it's a bra, so it supports women. But then also I thought, okay, not only do we have, women playing sports on TV, like on the channel, how else can we support women? Because the motto isn't "We support women on TV." The
Hmm.
motto isn't even "We support women in sports." It's just "We support women," period. And so when I got to like writing the business plan, when I got to like creating the menu, being able to go out and find purveyors, find vendors, like, oh, we're obviously going to have cocktails. Who do we want to be, on the cocktail list? We have 21 taps. Who do we want to be on the tap list? And I was just like, okay, our motto is "We support women." Let's pull the motto through everything, like as much as we can. That makes sense, clearly. Let's pull that through everything. And then that's where like the intentionality came out. And that wasn't built in. I like thought about it. And then as I was like kind of breaking down the steps to opening a restaurant, I got to that question of, oh, what's going to be on your menu? I was like, what is going to be on the menu? And then I thought, oh, as a chef, I saw firsthand how women businesses, farmers, ranchers, all those women, they were getting bypassed by like, big money. And like what was
Hmm.
easiest was like whoever came to the door the most. And it was like always dudes, always dudes. And so as a chef, I had the opportunity to buy from whoever I wanted. And so I made a lot of relationships
Hmm.
with female farmers and so on and so forth. And so when it got to the menu, I was like, oh, I already know these people. I'm going to bring some women in the door and we can like low key support women on the back end. And it wasn't something that we advertised right off the bat. It wasn't until people started asking about it. I was like, oh yeah, we support women in all these different ways. And they were like, oh, that's rad. And it turns out it's a very like pretty holistic, business plan. That again didn't start out that way. And the same with our cocktail menu. Like all of our signature cocktails are from Freeland Spirits, which is a woman-owned, operated distillery right in our backyard here in Portland. And in the entire history of the United States, there's been a handful of them. So the
Wow.
opportunity to partner with them to create this incredible cocktail list that we plan on just continuing to. More and more women are getting into food and beverage industries and like having their own businesses. And so we're going to just keep pulling in, like we just brought in a tequila brand that has a woman owner and also the master. It's not a distiller. There's another name for the woman who does like tequilas. But yeah, so they're a combo and we just brought them in. And so it's just like on and on and on. And it's like a constant, promoting and highlighting women. And if we don't have room on the bar, we go drink specials, we'll do food specials. that kind of thing. So it's always been like really community based. And then the opportunity to work with big brands is another point where I'm just like, okay, I need to check in with myself because they come in all glitzy glamour, big dollar bills, but then does it fit our mission? Does it
Mm-hmm.
have our best interest in mind, or what's in it for them? What's in it for us? Um, and you weigh it. And like when I'm gonna just be super honest, when Buick came to us, I wasn't sure how GM Buick felt about trans rights. And for me, that's been in the forefront of my mind with everything that's going
Mm-hmm.
on with legislation and hate crimes. And there's been a lot of stuff happening in Portland too. So it's kind of in the forefront of my mind. And so when Buick came up, I was like starstruck. I reached out to my PR and I was just like, is this real? Is this really happening? Oh my God. They want to bring in all this talent. Like, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm not sure how Buick feels about trans rights. And I just had like this kind of, like, this kind of buggy feeling like
Mm-hmm.
I need to find out. I need to figure it out. So I just straight up asked them and it took them a week to get back to me. But they were able to, give me an answer that felt authentic. It felt real. And also I told them that if ever anything happened where it was like Buick, trans rights, and the sports bra or whatever, that this was our stance, never going to change. And I said, are you guys okay with that? And they signed off on it. I signed off on it, and then we did the thing. But as an owner, I always have like that touchstone. The touchstone you go back to when things start to get really crazy, and you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, does this actually fit our mission? Does this
Mm-hmm.
suit the community? Like it might be great for me, it might be great for my pocketbook, it might be great for my staff. My staff's getting all, suited up, but does it make sense for the bra? And like now the bra is something bigger than me, bigger than the restaurant. It's something that carries a lot of weight now. And so I know that I have a lot of responsibility in taking care of that. And so I try to lead with that. I mean, I'm not like I make mistakes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just learning. It's just learning and trying to be authentic and staying true to the brand, staying true to the mission, and all of that stuff helps. And ultimately, it was born from wanting to build community.
But your journey is so inspirational to so many people who want to create change, who want to push boundaries. What words do you have for someone who wants to impact their community or the space that they stand tall in the way that you've impacted your space through the sports bra?
I only have my lived experience, so I feel like I'm like the worst at giving advice because I only know what I do. You know what I mean? But what has helped me is to really dig deep, figure out what you're passionate about, and let that be the drive. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, surround yourself with people you trust too, like having friends, advisors, folks in the business, out of the business, friends who've known you your whole life, who won't let you stray from who you really are. Like those are
Mm.
bumpers. Like I'm terrible at bowling. I need bumpers. And so for me personally, things like great friends, great advisors, business advisors, and then having a great mission or something that you're truly passionate about that no one or nothing can ever take away, not even failure can take away your love of this passion. Those are all bumpers for me. And when those bumpers are up, you can bounce all over the place making mistakes, but you're heading in the direction that you want to with your dream and your passion. And when you're doing that, can't lose. Can't lose.
Chef Win, when you are on the basketball court and when you are in the kitchen, there are two things that you must master. You must master the value of time. And you also must master the value of just handling pressure. So this is the segment in the show where we go into our rapid fire questions. And we're going to
Ooh,
test not
owie.
only those two things, but we're also going to test your precision. Are you down for it?
Oh my gosh, I'm nervous now. I didn't know there was going to be a test.
All right. Share one thing that everyone should know about Portland.
Oh man, it's very authentic. You got to be real here. There's no faking it.
Love it. A carbonated soft drink. What's the proper name? Is it soda or pop? This is a
Oh,
tough one.
it's
A
soda.
lot of
It's
pressure here.
soda all
It's
day. Soda
soda.
all day.
Oh man, we got to talk about that offline. Number one resource you recommend for someone seeking to start a business.
My number one resource was NerdWallet. I went straight to NerdWallet and I asked it, how do you start a business? And it had like a 10 step. And I literally printed that out and I did the 10 steps. That's how I started the sports bra, was NerdWallet. I feel like there's like a promotion. Like I should be on an advertisement or something for them.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. No doubt. What's the best advice you've received since opening the sports bra?
Oh, the best advice. If you don't know something, find somebody who knows the most about it and ask them all the questions. Like get rid of the ego, ask all the questions, get all the help you can possibly get.
That's sound advice. I love that one. This is the toughest question and the final question. All right. For someone going to the sports bra for the first time, we're going to try both, but you have to try one before you try the other. Which do we try first? Mom's baby back ribs or Aunt Tina's Vietnam wings?
Ribs all day. Ribs all day. There's nothing else like it on the planet. There's nothing else like it on the planet. Ribs all day. The wings, I feel like, are delicious, but also Vietnamese wings. Vietnamese wings is kind of a thing in Portland. There's different spots that have their version of Vietnamese wings, and it's our version. But mom's ribs, that's one of a kind.
Thank you so much, Chef Nguyen, for taking the time to join us on the About Time podcast.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Hello, About Time listeners. I am Kendall Ellis Powell, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development here at We Coach. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to head up to Portland to visit the sports bra. Maybe we can host our next watch party event there. I'm not sure Jenny worked that out for us, but until then, mark your calendars for November 1st, where we will have our next video chat with our partner, Advanced NIL. Our topic will be, you guessed it, name, image, and likeness. Join us on November 1st, where we will talk with experts about what's in the NIL, an informative and unbiased discussion with NIL experts about real-time trends and best practices and the impacts of NIL at the college and high school level. Registration is live now on our website. Go check it out at wecoachsports.org.
That's our show. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more episodes like this, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and to our YouTube channel.